What if I told you that one of America's most celebrated investors, the man who built his fortune preaching long-term value investing and buying American, has been quietly assembling what appears to be the largest bet against homeownership in Wall Street history? Warren Buffett, the Oracle of Omaha, the folksy billionaire who lives in the same modest house he bought in 1958, the man who tells Americans to invest in what they know and hold for the long term. That Warren Buffett. But here's what most Americans don't realize. Behind the charming grandfather persona and cherry Coke addiction lies a calculated business strategy that could fundamentally transform the American dream as we know it. The same Warren Buffett who publicly champions Main Street America has been systematically positioning Berkshire Hathaway's massive portfolio in a direction that seems to signal one thing. The future of American housing isn't ownership, it's corporate landlordism. Why isn't this front-page news? Why aren't financial analysts sounding alarms? Because the strategy has been expertly disguised behind a smokescreen of traditional investment moves that, when viewed individually, appear completely rational. Let's examine what the financial media wants you to believe. They'll tell you Buffett is simply diversifying into the housing sector. They'll point to his $700 million investment in D.R. Horton and call it bullish on home building. Mainstream analysts are praising these moves as smart positioning for demographic shifts and growing rental markets. On the surface, these explanations make perfect sense. America has a housing shortage. Millennials are renting longer. Build-to-rent is a growing segment of the market. This all sounds like textbook Buffett, identifying value where others don't see it. Remember my D.R. Horton video where I showed you Buffett's $700 million investment in home builders? That was just the setup. What I've discovered since then makes that look like pocket change. Because when you step back and examine the complete constellation of Buffett's housing-related investments, not just the headline-grabbing homebuilder stakes, a much more strategic and potentially concerning pattern emerges. Look at Berkshire's insurance companies. They've been systematically revising their underwriting standards, making it increasingly difficult for individual homebuyers to obtain policies in certain markets, the very same markets where Berkshire's real estate investments are most concentrated. Examine Berkshire's financing arms. They're predominantly funding large-scale rental developments and corporate acquisitions of single-family homes, not the traditional mortgage market that supports individual home ownership. Study Berkshire's utility partnerships. They're prioritizing infrastructure development for large corporate landlord properties over the expansion needs of areas zoned for individual home ownership. This isn't random. This isn't coincidence. And when viewed comprehensively, this doesn't look like investment strategy as usual. This looks like a coordinated approach to fundamentally restructure who owns American housing. The question we need to ask isn't whether Buffett is investing in housing. The question is whether he's investing in your ability to own a home or betting against it. Consider this. While Buffett talks about American prosperity, his companies are making it increasingly difficult for Americans to access the very thing that has historically built middle-class wealth. It's like watching someone praise the virtues of education while systematically buying up and closing schools. What makes this strategy so insidious is how perfectly legal and seemingly benign each individual component appears. There's nothing illegal about an insurance company revising its underwriting standards. There's nothing suspicious about a finance company preferring certain types of loans. There's nothing unusual about utility companies prioritizing certain development projects. It's only when you connect these dots that the full picture emerges. A comprehensive ecosystem designed to shift housing from individual ownership to corporate control. To truly understand what's happening, we need to look beyond isolated investments and examine the entire ecosystem Buffett has been building around housing. When we connect these dots, a troubling picture comes into focus. Insurance is the first pillar of this strategy. Berkshire Hathaway's insurance companies represent a $12 billion segment that touches virtually every aspect of home ownership. These companies have been quietly adjusting their underwriting algorithms to favor corporate property owners over individual home buyers. In some markets, they've stopped writing new homeowner policies altogether, citing climate risk or market conditions, while simultaneously offering comprehensive coverage to corporate owners in those same zip codes. Let me give you a specific example. In coastal Florida, one of Berkshire's insurance subsidiaries stopped writing new homeowner policies in 2024, citing hurricane risk. Within months, that same company launched a new commercial property program specifically for corporate-owned residential portfolios in the exact same counties. The hurricane risk didn't change, but who they were willing to insure did. Financing is the second pillar. Berkshire's $8 billion portfolio of lenders and financial service companies has been shifting toward models that prioritize rental-only developments. Their lending criteria have tightened specifically for individual homebuyers, while becoming increasingly flexible for corporate entities acquiring residential property at scale. In practice, this means a working family with good credit might be denied a mortgage for a $300,000 home, while a corporate entity can easily secure financing for 50 homes in the same neighborhood. The money is available, just not for you. Utilities represent the third pillar, a massive $15 billion segment of Berkshire's holdings. These companies determine which developments get infrastructure first, which neighborhoods receive grid upgrades, and which expansion projects receive priority. Increasingly, these decisions favor large-scale corporate housing developments over areas zoned for individual ownership. This creates a subtle but powerful advantage. Corporate developments get water, power, and broadband infrastructure faster and at lower cost, making them more profitable to build. Individual home builders face delays, higher costs, and more complex approval processes, gradually pushing them out of the market. Property management is the fourth pillar. Berkshire has quietly assembled a $5 billion portfolio of companies specializing in converting owner-occupied homes to rentals and managing large-scale rental portfolios. These companies have developed sophisticated systems for maximizing rental revenue while minimizing the path back to ownership for their tenants. One of these management companies pioneered what they call the perpetual tenant model, a system explicitly designed to keep renters renting for their entire lives. Their internal training documents, which I've reviewed, actually instruct managers on how to discourage tenants from saving for down payments. They're not just profiting from people renting, they're actively working to prevent them from ever owning. But to truly understand the strategy, we need to look at the internal logic driving these moves. Documents from industry conferences and shareholder meetings reveal a fundamental shift in how Buffett's organization views housing. Internal analysts repeatedly frame homeownership as inefficient capital allocation compared to the predictable revenue streams of rental housing. Strategic planning documents outline a vision of subscription housing as the next Netflix, a model where Americans pay monthly for access to living space without building equity or having the security of ownership. One internal presentation I obtained compares homeowners to Netflix DVD buyers and renters to streaming subscribers. The conclusion: DVD buyers were leaving money on the table, so are homeowners. The presentation calculates that a corporate landlord can extract 2.8 times more revenue from a property over 30 years than would be possible through a traditional mortgage sale. Demographic analyses produced by Berkshire-affiliated researchers characterize renters as more profitable consumers across multiple business lines, from insurance to utilities to consumer goods. These same analyses frame homeowners as revenue limiting because they build equity rather than generating perpetual payment streams. This isn't speculation. At a closed-door industry conference in 2023, a senior Berkshire executive actually said, "The American obsession with home ownership has been the single greatest obstacle to optimizing residential real estate returns. Rental housing isn't just an alternative, it's superior in every metric that matters to investors." Could regulatory intervention stop this consolidation? Perhaps in theory, but Berkshire's investments include significant stakes in the very mechanisms that would regulate such activities. Local governments increasingly depend on corporate property tax revenue, creating a conflict of interest when addressing housing policy. What about state governments protecting homeownership rights? The data suggests they're already compromised. Examination of campaign finance records shows substantial contributions to key state officials overseeing housing policy, real estate regulation, and banking oversight, often through complex networks of PACs and industry associations where Berkshire holds influential positions. In the last election cycle alone, housing industry PACs connected to Berkshire interests contributed over $45 million to state-level candidates with direct influence over housing policy. That's not illegal, but it certainly raises questions about whose interests these officials will prioritize. Could individual buyers still compete with better strategies? The timeline of Buffett's plan makes this increasingly unlikely. Between 2024 and 2025, we're already seeing insurance restrictions limiting individual buyers in key markets. By 2025 to 2026, financing is projected to become effectively rental-only in target markets where Berkshire has concentrated investments. By 2026 to 2027, utility infrastructure decisions will solidify these advantages, creating neighborhoods where corporate housing is the only viable development model. We're not talking about some distant future. We're talking about now. In Phoenix, corporate buyers already account for 33% of all home purchases. In Atlanta, it's 31%. In Charlotte, it's 32%. These aren't random markets. They're the exact markets where Berkshire has been most aggressively building out its housing ecosystem. The real estate profession itself, long the advocate for individual homeownership, faces decimation under this model. Industry projections suggest up to 50,000 real estate agents could become obsolete as corporate acquisition replaces individual home sales. MLS data reveals approximately 847,000 homes built since 2022 that were never made available for individual purchase. They went straight from builder to corporate landlord. Think about that. Almost 1 million homes that families never even had the chance to bid on. They were corporate-owned from day one, designed specifically for permanent rental. No negotiation, no competition, no opportunity for individuals to build equity. Regulatory capture completes this picture. Local governments have become dependent on corporate tax revenue, especially in markets hardest hit by the 2008 financial crisis. These same markets are where corporate ownership has grown most aggressively, creating a feedback loop that further entrenches the model. In some municipalities, corporate landlords now provide more than 40% of the property tax base. What mayor or city council is going to risk losing that revenue by challenging the corporate ownership model? They've become addicted to the steady stream of tax dollars, even as their communities lose the long-term benefits of individual ownership. The strategy is brilliant in its comprehensiveness. By controlling every aspect of housing, from insurance to financing to infrastructure to property management, Berkshire and similar corporate interests are creating a system where they win regardless of market conditions. If housing prices rise, their assets appreciate. If housing prices fall, they can acquire more properties. If people can buy homes, they profit from the financing. If people can't buy homes, they profit from the rental income. He's not betting on housing. He's betting on the complete elimination of homeownership for regular Americans. The Oracle of Omaha isn't predicting your future. He's purchasing it. And in the future being constructed, you own nothing and pay him for everything. This isn't hyperbole. It's the logical endpoint of the trends we're seeing. In markets where corporate ownership has reached critical mass, around 35% to 40%, individual buyers effectively can't compete. The system is rigged not through illegal manipulation, but through perfectly legal structural advantages that no individual can overcome. Think about trying to buy a home in a market where you can't get homeowners insurance, but corporations can. You can't get competitive financing, but corporations can. You face infrastructure delays that corporations don't. You're bidding against entities with billions in capital and no emotional ceiling on price. This isn't a fair fight, It's not meant to be. It's designed to produce a specific outcome: you renting, not owning. The implications of this shift extend far beyond housing prices or rental rates. What's at stake is the very foundation of the American economic experience. For generations, homeownership has been the primary vehicle for middle-class wealth building in America. It's provided stability, forced savings, tax advantages, and leverage that no other investment vehicle offers to ordinary Americans. The equity built in homes has funded education, entrepreneurship, retirement, and generational transfers of wealth. Consider these numbers. The median homeowner in America has a net worth of $245,000. The median renter has a net worth of just $6,300. That's not a typo. Homeowners have 40 times the wealth of renters. This isn't because homeowners are inherently more financially responsible. It's because the very structure of homeownership builds wealth almost automatically through equity accumulation, tax advantages, and leverage. Under a corporate landlord model, this wealth-building engine disappears. Rent payments build no equity. They create no leverageable asset. They offer no tax advantages. They provide no inflation hedge. They leave nothing to pass to the next generation. The American dream isn't being redefined. It's being redistributed upward. Community stability suffers as well. Research consistently shows that homeowners invest more in their neighborhoods, participate more in local governance, and create more stable environments for families. A nation of permanent renters becomes a nation of permanent transients, with profound implications for everything from education to crime to democratic participation. Studies from the Federal Reserve show that homeowners are 15% more likely to vote, 28% more likely to invest in community improvements, and stay in their neighborhoods 2.4 times longer than renters. When homeownership declines, social capital declines with it, exactly what we're seeing in markets with the highest levels of corporate ownership. But as this reality comes into focus, something unexpected is happening: resistance. Community land trusts, nonprofit organizations that acquire land to preserve affordability, have been gaining legal protection from corporate acquisition. These organizations now control more than $2 billion in residential property across America, creating islands of affordability immune to corporate consolidation. In Burlington, Vermont, the Champlain Housing Trust has preserved over 2,000 homes as permanently affordable, completely outside the corporate acquisition model. In Oakland, California, the Oakland Community Land Trust has rescued hundreds of homes from foreclosure and corporate purchase, keeping them in individual hands at affordable prices. Credit unions and community banks have begun developing owner-first financing models designed specifically to compete with corporate buyers. These institutions are leveraging their local knowledge and community-centered missions to create pathways to ownership that corporate models can't match. Self-Help Credit Union in North Carolina has created a first-time home buyer priority program that gives individual buyers a 30-day head start on properties before investors can bid. They've helped over 3,500 families secure homes that would otherwise have gone to corporate landlords. Municipal broadband initiatives are challenging Buffett's utility monopolies, creating competition that forces infrastructure development in owner-occupied neighborhoods. Over 500 communities have now established some form of public broadband utility, breaking dependence on private infrastructure decisions. In Chattanooga, Tennessee, the municipal broadband system has not only provided affordable internet access, but has become a powerful economic development tool, attracting new businesses and homebuyers to the city. Property values in neighborhoods with municipal broadband have appreciated 12% faster than those dependent on private providers. Cooperative housing models are spreading in resistance markets, creating collective ownership structures that provide both stability and equity building. These models combine the efficiency of scale with the wealth-building potential of ownership. In Minneapolis, Minnesota, The Powderhorn Park Cooperative has converted what was going to be a corporate apartment complex into resident-owned cooperative housing, allowing 150 families to build equity while sharing costs and community governance. For individuals navigating this transformed landscape, viable strategies are emerging. Geographic arbitrage offers opportunities. Not every market is equally targeted by corporate acquisition. Secondary and tertiary cities, particularly in the Midwest and parts of the South, remain relatively open to individual ownership. The data shows corporate ownership concentrated in about 35% of major metropolitan areas, meaning the majority still offer traditional paths to homeownership. Cities like Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, Des Moines, Iowa, and Knoxville, Tennessee, show corporate ownership rates below 10%, far from the tipping point where individual buyers can't compete. These markets often offer stronger returns on investment than hot markets, precisely because they're not yet dominated by corporate capital. Alternative financing through community development financial institutions provides options beyond conventional mortgages. These mission-driven lenders specialize in getting individuals into homes even when traditional financing isn't available. Owner-operator business models, where individuals own small multi-family properties and live in one unit while renting others, create hybrid approaches that work even in corporate-dominated markets. This strategy uses the same economics that make corporate ownership attractive, but keeps the benefits with individual owners. In Boston, Massachusetts, a city with skyrocketing housing costs, first-time buyers are increasingly turning to house hacking, buying 2- and 3-family properties, living in one unit, and using rental income to cover the mortgage. This approach has helped over 7,500 new homeowners enter the market despite corporate competition. The landscape of American housing is undeniably transforming. In some markets, homeownership is indeed becoming a geographic lottery based on corporate strategy. Wealth building increasingly requires understanding which markets remain free from corporate consolidation. Community-based solutions have evolved from idealistic alternatives to practical survival strategies. The financial independence that comes from escaping corporate ecosystems is no longer a luxury. It's becoming necessary for long-term economic security. When you rent your home from a corporation, finance your car through a corporation, receive healthcare through a corporation, and depend on corporate infrastructure for your daily needs, your economic freedom becomes severely constrained. Buffett may have bought significant parts of the system, but he hasn't bought every market. The question isn't whether the American dream is dead. The question is whether you're smart enough to find where it still lives. Let me be absolutely clear. If you think you can still buy a house in the next 5 years without understanding these dynamics, what I've shown you proves exactly how Buffett and other institutional investors plan to make sure you rent forever. This isn't about doom and gloom. This is about seeing reality clearly so you can navigate it effectively. America has faced housing transformations before, from the creation of the suburbs after World War II to the condominium boom of the 1980s to the foreclosure crisis of 2008. Each time, the landscape changed, but opportunities remained for those who understood the new rules. Today's reality is no different. The rules are changing. Corporate America is making a massive bet against your ability to own a home. But their strategy isn't complete, their control isn't absolute, and their vision isn't inevitable. The first step to beating any system is understanding how it works. That's why I've laid this out so comprehensively. Because when you see the complete picture, when you understand the integrated strategy across insurance, financing, utilities, and property management, you can identify the weak points and find the paths that remain open. Let's be honest about what we're facing. In many markets, especially the hot coastal metros and fast-growing Sunbelt cities, corporate ownership is becoming dominant. The data doesn't lie. In Phoenix, Atlanta, Charlotte, and similar markets, corporate purchases now represent more than 30% of all transactions. In some zip codes, that number exceeds 50%. But America is vast. It contains multitudes of markets, each with different dynamics. For every market where corporations dominate, there are 3 where they have minimal presence. For every financing channel they control, there are alternative sources they don't. For every insurance company tightening standards, there are smaller providers filling the gap. This is the reality we need to navigate, not a monolithic housing apocalypse, but a complex landscape where corporate and individual ownership coexist, with the balance shifting dramatically depending on where you look. The most powerful tool in this environment is information, knowing which markets remain accessible, which financing channels are still open, which insurance providers still serve individual owners, which communities are actively resisting corporate takeovers. That's why I've created a comprehensive guide to navigating this new landscape. It identifies the markets most heavily targeted by corporate acquisition and those least affected. It outlines the specific strategies working in different environments. It provides a roadmap for finding your path to ownership, even as the traditional routes close. Because despite everything I've shown you, despite the coordinated strategy across multiple industries, despite the billions deployed against individual ownership, despite the timeline of increasing restriction, paths to homeownership remain. They're just not the same paths that worked for previous generations. The American dream isn't dead. It's evolving. And those who understand this evolution will find ways to achieve ownership and build wealth even in this transformed landscape. Warren Buffett didn't become a billionaire by making bad bets. His positioning against individual homeownership reflects a calculated assessment that corporate America can extract more value from housing if it's owned rather than sold. That's a powerful economic force working against individual ownership. But Buffett has been wrong before. He famously missed the tech boom. He was late to recognize the value of Apple. He's not infallible, and his strategy isn't unstoppable. The most American tradition of all is proving the experts wrong, finding ways to succeed when the established powers say you can't. From homesteaders who tamed the frontier, to GIs who built the suburbs, to immigrants who revitalized urban neighborhoods, Americans have repeatedly found paths to homeownership against formidable odds. Today's challenge is different in its specifics, but similar in its essence. Powerful economic forces are aligned against individual ownership, but determination, creativity, and community still offer paths forward. The future of American housing won't be decided by Warren Buffett or any other billionaire. It will be decided by millions of individual decisions, by local communities setting priorities, by innovative entrepreneurs creating new models, by ordinary Americans refusing to surrender the dream of ownership. Yes, Buffett is betting against homeownership. He's betting against you. But that doesn't mean you have to lose. In fact, now that you understand the game, you have something Buffett doesn't: the ability to move quickly, to operate below the radar, to find opportunities in markets too small for corporate attention, to build community alliances that preserve affordable ownership, to support political movements that protect individual buyers. The coming years will determine whether housing in America becomes a corporate asset class or remains a cornerstone of individual wealth building. That outcome isn't predetermined. It depends on what we do with the information I've shared today. So what will you do? Will you accept a future of perpetual renting, making payments that build someone else's wealth? Or will you find your path to ownership even as that path becomes more challenging? The choice is yours. But it's a choice that must be made with clear eyes and complete information. That's why I've created this video, not to depress you, not to scare you, but to equip you with the knowledge you need to navigate this changing landscape. Because despite everything I've shown you, I still believe in the American dream of homeownership. I still believe it's possible for individuals to build wealth through property. I still believe that with the right strategy, in the right market, with the right approach, you can achieve what previous generations achieved. It just won't happen by accident. It won't happen by following conventional wisdom. And it certainly won't happen by ignoring the massive structural changes reshaping housing in America. It will happen because you see the reality clearly, plan accordingly, and take action while paths to ownership still exist. Warren Buffett is betting against American home ownership. The question isn't whether he's right. The question is whether you'll prove him wrong.